This is Horizon News Network. My name is Michael Cifuentes, and the year is 1929. Specifically, October 29th, when the New York stock market crashed, leaving virtually everyone in America penniless. This started a period of time that we now regard to as the Great Depression. The Great Depression is an immediate effect of many people in earlier years before 1929 buying an excess of stock and not saving up money to pay off the remainder of their stock, meaning that their stocks were left virtually worthless, and they had lost most of their money and most of their investments and savings in a blink of an eye. Many people were in shock, many people were in rage, and total chaos ruled America and its people for over a decade. The Depression hit everyone hard. Many people went from living in homes to living in tents, with having an excess of food to having little to no food for their families. But one group that was hit the most was the African American population. By 1932, half of the Negro male population had lost their jobs due to the fact that many whites were firing them to make openings for whites to get jobs. The blacks were treated horribly. Laws were put against them in order for them to stay in poverty, or in order for them to be separated. Most of these laws were known as the Jim Crow laws. In political news, the vast majority of the African Americans voted Republican. They believed that the Republicans would help them through the Great Depression. When President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was sworn into office in 1932, he immediately acted upon the issues of the African Americans. He entertained many African American guests into the White House and began to vote bills and laws into place that would help African Americans regain their equivalency to whites, regain their jobs, and regain their money, and essentially their way of lives. President Roosevelt began attacking the issues that were plaguing not only the blacks, but also the whites and the women and many other people. He was beginning to make a reform during the Depression. This led to many people supporting Roosevelt in his peaceful campaigns to end the Depression. By the beginning of World War II, America had gotten out of the Depression, thanks to Roosevelt. Now to Angel Leo with some news.
It's depressing!
Thank you, Angel, but frankly, I'm going to need a lot more than that.
Since you asked so kindly, during the Depression in the South, the rights of African Americans were put to the test, as many of them were accused of murder, theft, embezzlement, among other crimes. Many of the defendants of these crimes were purposefully found guilty because of their skin color being colored, and nothing more than that. There was such a case where a group of black teenagers were accused of raping 2 young white females. On March 25th, 1931, a group of white teenagers alerted the local authorities in Scottsboro, Alabama, that a group of 9 black teenagers had raped 2 white females. The black teenagers were then sent to trial, and all but one of these teens were convicted of rape and sentenced to death. However, Chief Justice John C. Anderson of the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that the defendants had been denied of impartial jury, fair trial, fair sentencing, and effective counsel. They were then given another trial, only to again be found guilty by the jury, but in this retrial, one of the witnesses admitted to fabricating the entire story, so another retrial was issued, and again, the teenagers were found guilty due to an all-white jury. Most of Scottsboro boys ended up serving life in prison. As the rights of African Americans were being tested and lives were being literally destroyed, many people took it upon themselves to shine light on the reality that many people were trying to hide. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Angel. Novels, plays, television shows, and film have all played a gigantic part in shaping America and how we see it today. But they all played a gigantic part during the Great Depression. One of the most praised pieces of literature is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God, published in 1937. Hurston talks about how women had to endure difficulties during the Great Depression because they were women. At this time, at the early 20th century, America was a patriarchal society. We believed that men ruled everything. Aside from women barely gaining the right to vote not 17 years before, we still treated them as unequals. And so Hurston tells the story of Jane Crawford, a woman who aspired to become equal, a woman who did not want any of her husbands to abuse her because of her race, gender, or social status. Many depictions of the Great Depression through different point of views exist as well, aside from women and aside from men, as seen in It's a Wonderful Life, talking about a man who tries to commit suicide during Christmas Eve. During the Great Depression, he sees no way out, he tries to commit suicide. Lovely musical. Another musical that took the world by storm was Annie, that took the depiction of the Depression through the eyes of children. Now, many children were with their families and had little to nothing to eat. But this is the story of an orphan girl named Annie, who strives to become one of the best actresses. So many people to not forget how many people endured the Depression, how many people stood up for themselves, for their rights during the Depression. The Depression inspired great works of film, literature, arts, plays, television. This really did help shine a light on a much needed dark reality of the Depression. Back to Angel.
The African American population would not let their rights be abused, and so they fought for their rights. Many people just supported the organizations that were protecting the rights, or at least were supposedly protecting the rights of the Negro citizens. But there were people who actually did stand up and protest against the abuse of African American rights. On Easter Sunday, 1939, Marian Anderson sang in front of the steps of the Lincoln Memorial after the Dars of the American Revolution refused to let her sing an integrated audience in Constitution Hall. And the District of Columbia declined her request to use a public high school for her performance. People everywhere began to rally up and join the movement for the rights of African Americans. That is all, Michael.
This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the Great Depression. There are so many events, people, and places that come all together to make up this era of time that we now know as the Great Depression. During this time, race relations were at their worst in our country, with so many African Americans being abused and just treated badly by their majority whites. Though there was a turn when Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president and started helping the African Americans with their rights, or as people of equivalency to whites. This is also the time when the American Civil Rights Movement began to flourish, with people such as Marian Anderson, Zora Hurston, and up to Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. This is also the time when the trial by jury was being taken advantage of in the South, as you can see with the trial of the Scottsboro Boys, being tried ultimately 3 times with no avail to a non-guilty conviction. This is the time of the Great Depression. This was one of America's darkest hours. This was the time when America's resilience as a country was put to the test. And as you can see, we have come out stronger because of it. This is Michael Cifuentes for HNN News, signing off.
The Horizon News Network is brought to you by Ice Cold Coca-Cola and McDonald's. I'm loving it. That's all, Michael. Michael? 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 It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Inspired amazing works. America had gotten out of the Depression. When President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was sworn in on the turning